Okay, welcome to the shop. My name's Mr. Wallace. Today we're going to take a look at the bandsaw. Okay, so the bandsaw gets its name from the fact that the blade is actually a band of metal. Here we've got these two wheels. We've got one up above and one down below. And running on those two wheels is this thin piece of metal. And the piece of metal has teeth on the front. So the blade runs like this, and those teeth cut through the wood that you pass through the saw. Now, operating the bandsaw is really simple. You just switch it on. Red and yellow, easy to see in case there's an emergency. Just slap that switch and off it turns. The first thing, obviously, is to wear proper safety gear. I'll be cutting through a piece of material that's about 1.5 inches thick. So I only need to expose a little over 1.5 inches of the blade here. So we've got some controls on the side of the saw where we can raise and lower this blade guard, which makes it a much safer tool to use because you only have to expose the amount of blade that you're actually going to use to cut through your material. So the first thing you want to do before you even switch the saw on is to set the height of this blade guard so that you can get it just enough clearance so that your workpiece can pass through under that blade guard. All right, tighten this off and it's good to go. Another thing to talk about here, this is called the fence, and it moves along and it sits at a 90-degree angle to the blade. So if you wanted to make a straight cut, you just set this fence, lock it down, and then you run that piece of work right up against this fence and through the blade, and it'll make a nice straight cut for you. Okay, so I'm going to do a little project here today. I think I'm going to make a fancy little candle holder. So what I'm going to do is draw an outline on this piece of 2x6, and then I'm going to cut through that with the bandsaw and then smooth it all out with the power sanders. Okay, I'm just going to make a basic shape, nothing too fancy, but I want to use this to practice a few curves. So I think I'll round these corners off here, maybe make a little indent, and make some nice round. There. And we'll see how that turns out. Now when you're cutting on a bandsaw, you want to cut a little bit to the outside of those curves. So I'm going to run the saw blade right to the outside. I'm going to leave those pencil marks on the wood. I don't want to take those off. What I'll do is do the best cut that I can next to those lines, and then I'll take the workpiece and sand right up to those lines and make it precise by using the sanders. Alright, well here's my finished workpiece. You can see along here I cut a little too close to the line, and I actually cut on the inside of it. So if this was a precision piece of work, I might have just caused some waste. I might have had to start from the beginning again. But as you can see on these other ones, I left that pencil line there, and what I'm going to do is put it on the belt sander and sand it right up to those lines. Another thing, I don't know if you can see it on the camera there, but when you go through, use a saw like the bandsaw here, it tends to leave teeth marks all along there, and so depending on how accurate you've been with your cuts, you might be left with quite a bit of cleanup to do with the sander. Now as you can see, there's a bunch of sawdust left behind all over the place here. So if I'm going to use a piece of equipment that produces sawdust, I've got to use the vacuum right afterwards. That's one of the rules of the shop. You make sawdust, you vacuum. So let's vacuum. There you have it. Bandsaw is nice and clean, don't have a whole bunch of sawdust left behind for the next user. So that's the basics of using a bandsaw. It takes a little bit of practice, but once you've got that practice, it becomes really easy to make nice, accurate curving cuts with your work. All right, that's it for now. See you next time.